In this video, we're going to look a little bit at the Smartermarks program and what it takes to correct errors after the scans have gone through and make sure our student information is accurate. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our forms and versions, and instead of going down to our communities, I'm going to work in a test exam, and I'm going to go ahead and mark some new scans. The PDF that we're going to select is a nice simple one, which is 3 students with some errors. As we upload and process the scans, you'll notice that it does try to prompt us with a few possible warnings and errors. So the scans are being processed and you'll see 2 errors or warnings. Sometimes issues aren't actually flagged as errors or warnings. For example, if a student does not respond, it doesn't show up as an error. It may be a student that actually didn't respond, but it could also be something you want to look at. So we're going to be looking at 2 things. We're going to be looking at the actual student responses while we look at some of these errors. So warnings were encountered. Too many bubbles filled in the student ID section on page 1. It is nice to actually look at the student PDF and say, well, what happened on page 1? Well, on page 1, as I look at the student ID, I look at this 4, which has the 4 and 5 bubbled in. Clearly that is an issue if we've got the 4 and the 5 bubbled. Too many bubbles filled in the multiple choice section on page 4. So again, as we go to page 4, we can see there should be an issue in the multiple choice section. And there is. These are very obvious issues, and we don't know for this what a correction is, and this would need to be an incorrect answer if they have 2 responses. But there are some things that are a little less obvious, like this little spot right here. It is correctly saying this is an A, and sometimes you get ambiguously filled in bubbles as an error code, and sometimes not. So we're going to look at a few of these errors and warnings and try to fix them after the fact. This last error is an unable to read a page on page 3. And so if we were to go to page 3, right above Amy's, we see that there is a blank page. So maybe there is some scrap paper that was left in the middle of the bubble sheets, or maybe this is the back side of a 2-sided scan. Regardless, we do have unable to read a page, and that is not actually affecting our results. So that is good news. So what we're going to do, instead of looking at our student reports, which show us each student's responses. This is Amy's responses, and I do see that there is a star here, which is kind of interesting. This means that they didn't actually bubble anything in. So I might check Amy's to say, was it an intentional, I didn't answer a question, or did she forget to bubble things in? Similarly with John, there doesn't appear to be a response for question number 3 in the multiple choice. Regardless, we've got some incorrect responses that I'm going to go in and have a quick look at. There are a number of different student response options, and so this one currently is looking at a few of the incorrect responses instead of looking at the correct and incorrect. So for this, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our forms and versions, and we're going to click on this assessment, and when we click on score and browse scores, when we're here, we can click on this and again, view our student reports, view our Excel spreadsheet of our responses, but instead we're going to click Edit. And I'm going to look at the first student name, the student ID number, and there was the problem with bubbling things in, that 4 didn't get recorded. But I can scan through first student, second student, third student. And it did say John had an issue with one of the bubbling in questions. And so we're going to double check some of these scans, but I'm going to pay a little bit of attention to Amy's numerical response here, number 1, and see what that looked like. So as I scan through, I'm looking for anything unique or strange, especially in the numerical response, more so than the multiple choice. So let's look at Amy's numerical response number 1 and see if she did leave this blank or if this was an unintentional answer. So let's go see Amy's responses. So for Amy, scrolling past the multiple choice to the numerical, I do see lots of answers. And right there, I do see for the numerical response 1, there is no bubbles filled in, but the response was supposed to be 0.2. So I'm feeling like I'm not penalizing Amy today. for filling in these bubbles. She gets a 0.2 filled into those bubbles. We can correct all of these after the scans are completed and click Save. Now, as we think, okay, the scores are saved, and if you were to click on View the student reports, whether you're viewing all of the responses or just the incorrect ones, I'm noticing Amy's numeric response 1 is still incorrect and it still has a star for that response. So I'm going to instead, as I close these result tabs and the scans, I'm going to click Rescore. And this is going to rescore their grades with the answer key. And now I'm going to go back to the reports and view. This time looking at Amy's, I do see that there is her response of 0.2. It's not correct, but I do see that mark is now correctly scored and the student reports are now updated. Again, there are far more things to have a look at and see if these answers are all scored correctly. This star is correlated to, for John, multiple choice number 3. So if we really wanted, we can go back and look at John's multiple choice number 3 and say, oh, is that a D that's filled in, or is that a little bit, is that erased? And you'd have to make that decision to say, was John's response D? The computer is not recognizing it, so you need to make that decision. Once you're satisfied with your results and things are correctly scored, you can go and click on View Simple CSV if you would like a very clean, concise set of responses. So looking at our final set of responses, this is again only 3 students, but you can see it's a student name and a score out of the total, and this might be the cleanest way to look at their name and their final score.